Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a laser focused, quick fire interview on food and the economy with international experts, where we seek answers to questions all of us should be asking. I'm Ajay Jakar, Chairman, Bharat Krishik Samaj, Farmers Forum India. Today, we're delighted to have Professor Corinna Hawkes, Director at the Center for Food Policy at City University of London, with us. Her work is focused on diets, obesity, malnutrition, health, and the food systems. Thank you, Corinna, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
The UN Food System Summit has just drawn to a close. What are the top three proposals to emerge that will translate into concrete actions to help change the broken food systems?
The three things I think that were the most important that came out of the summit. The first were the national food systems pathways, which countries have been putting together. Will they be implemented? I don't know, but the fact that they exist and that countries have engaged in developing food systems pathways, I think is a real move forward. A second thing I would like to mention, I don't really think there's three top things. There's three things that are meaningful from my perspective, is a coalition that I'm involved with, the Healthy Diets Coalition, the Coalition on Healthy Diets and Sustainable Food Systems. One of the big challenges that we face is that there's so much activity going on in food systems, so much potential to influence what people eat, but we haven't done a very good job of understanding how it all fits together, and aligning it in the right direction, and that's what we hope to do in the coalition. And thirdly, I think that one of the most important things that emerged was new relationships. So it's not a specific action, a specific coalition, a specific thing, but it's those kind of indirect, intangible relationships where people who never would have had the chance to meet each other have met each other. And I actually think that might be the most transformative aspect of the summit.
I think you're right on that, because the ability to network and change policy, the potential is immense. No food systems can be all encompassing. There will be disagreements. For example, the proposals of the scientific group of the UN Food System Summit have very little resemblance with the UN Food System Summit Wise Share Production Champions Network, the Producer Engagement Group, or even the Action Track 3 Nature Positive Production proposals. So frankly, what are the big misses at the Food System Summit, if I may ask you that?
How it all fits together. The big promise of the summit for me was the ability to step back and look at the big picture and understand all of the different connections in the system, not because it's academically interesting, but because it has profound implications for what we need to do, and also how we need to do it and who we need to do it with. And that ability to make connections was done through these relationship building, as I've mentioned. But actually, the summit, I think, missed the opportunity to say, okay, so there's this action over here, there's that action over here, there's this point of view, there's this ideology, there's this understanding, there's this language. How do we actually step back and see how it all fits together? And maybe it was just too much to ask. It was too much to ask, clearly. So perhaps it's unfair, but I think the big next step is to have a governance structure that is really able to understand how all of these different things fit together in order to really identify what the crucial systems leverage points are. What are the absolutely crucial things that we need to change in order to tip the system into a transformed system?
Well, I really hope the governance structure that you're talking about has stakeholders as producers and consumers, and it does not limit itself to economists and scientists. I mean, as a farmer, that's what I think.
I agree. It does need to have this diversity of stakeholders, but that needs very careful management. It needs people who know how to listen. It means people who are open-minded. It means people who will listen with curiosity. So it takes a certain type of person and a systems thinker to be able to manage that diversity, because it's difficult and there'll be conflict.
The 2021 Global Food 50-50 report reviews the gender and equity-related policies and practices of 52 global food system organizations. You have highlighted that men hold 73% of CEO and board chairs in food system organizations, and women represent less than 34% of senior management. What is the solution to this?
Well, it's a very good question, and I applaud the International Food Policy Research Institute and the Global Health 50/50 team for producing that report. My own approach, a solution to it, is to have established, co-founded a new leadership initiative, a women's leadership initiative for the most part, in nutrition and food systems, which is focused on the idea that we need to adopt different ways of leading, so specific leadership practices. So at the moment, certain types of leadership practices are rewarded. And while those leadership practices, quite macho, top-down type of practices, are adopted by both men and women, and there's no clear delineation, I do believe that women can bring to leadership a diversity of aptitudes and skills around participation, around listening, as I just mentioned, about the power of reflection, the power of vulnerability. And these are the skills that I think we really do need in order to manage our way through the conflict in the food system space. But they're not rewarded. But if we enabled women to unleash the way that they want to lead and said, we will reward these behaviors, rather than the typical ones which are rewarded, I think that would give women the power to come through and move the barriers out of their way in order to become to put them in more senior leadership positions. So it's not just about lists or quotas. It's actually about how we lead, and recognizing a broader diversity of leadership skills and aptitudes that are needed to manage the food system.
That's really nice. Which gets me to the next question on which you are very passionate. You have been a part of the expert working group that has just released a paper, a 10-year healthy weight strategy. In your view, in the report, what are the recommendations that will face reluctance from regulators and policymakers? For example, like banning junk food advertisements or taxing unhealthy foods. Do such things form part of the recommendations?
Yes, they do. And that report is a result of a lot of work, a lot of evidence gathering as well. And it includes a whole diversity of actions that are needed, including stricter regulation on marketing and so on. And yes, that will face opposition from policymakers and business, because it threatens our standard economic model of how food businesses make profit and make money. And that, of course, will threaten certain interests. But if we don't have those kinds of regulations that level the playing field, the businesses that want to lead are still going to be disadvantaged. So in my view, regulation is not some kind of thing that stops anybody from doing things. It actually enables them to innovate and do things in different ways. So I think we need to view regulation differently and frame it differently as an enabler rather than a disabler. But it's gonna take time to get there.
Well, with all our best wishes for your good work you're doing on this.
Thank you.
You have talked about crafting a vision for food systems. What do you visualize when you do so? More particularly, does consolidation in food value chain form an important part of the puzzle to unravel?
When I think about a vision, I think about something, what something looks like. And so that means what do we see on the outside? And I see a plate or a bowl or whatever it is that people eat from, full of delicious and healthy food in front of everybody in the world. There's profound inequalities, devastating inequalities in the diets that people eat, with children just, kind of eating starches on the one hand and junk food on the other. So I see a healthy plate, a healthy bowl, a healthy leaf, whatever it is. And I also have a vision of a street where, or a store, and where you walk past and you walk in, and it just makes you want to eat and enjoy and love eating healthily. It's a vision of enjoyment. It's a vision of pleasure. And I think that if everybody in the world had the opportunity to take pleasure from food, life's tough, life's a struggle. And if they have the opportunity to take pleasure and eat healthily, then their lives would be better. And it's the same in a rural area. What would I want to see growing in the fields? Food that I think that is going to nourish people. So it's a vision of the world and what it looks like, and it's a vision of the food in front of people. And then you sort of think, well, what system do we need to produce that? And we need to start with people and say, what kind of system is going to feed people well? And at the moment, our system, which is highly consolidated with power imbalances, is a bit warped, really. And so I think there's a lot of changes that need to happen in order to enable that vision of what we can see.
IPCC on food, how far are we from it?
Well, you've got the IPCC on climate change, and climate change is a huge issue, but food is just like even huger. I mean, the number of issues which are connected to food, whether it's people's emotional health or the health of the planet or the livelihoods of millions of small scale farmers. I mean, it's just huge. So I am not sure how practical it would be to have an IPCC on food. And I worry deeply about who would be on it, and like all of the issues around power and science and whose knowledge counts. So I'm a bit nervous about the idea. I'm in favor of good governance. I'm in favor of good science. But I'd be concerned that it would end up being lots of well-supported scientists flying around the world being terribly important, and focusing on very particular issues, because you'd have to choose, and then whose issues, how would you decide those issues? So I think I just can't quite visualize how it would work. So I think that even if there is a move towards it, I think there's a lot of work to do before really figuring out what's going to make a difference.
I think so. That's a good summary of the challenges that an IPCC on food would face. Thank you so much for your time, Corinna, for coming on the interview, and best of luck and all the strength to you for all the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It's been a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.